With countries opening back up for international travel and tourism, people want to know, which country is the safest country to travel to during coronavirus? You guys asked me that as well, and I set off to find the answer, and spoiler alert, it was more complicated than I thought. But I have brought back the most important information for you guys here today with 5 different sources of which countries are the safest to travel to for COVID. In this video, I'm going to compare and contrast each list, give you my thoughts, and at the end provide a summary of the countries that appeared most often on every list so that you can decide for yourself where you'll travel next. The first report I looked at was a global COVID-19 safety assessment on hundreds of countries around the world by the Deep Knowledge Group. That report came out in June, but I was curious if the top 10 countries from June were the same as they are now. The Deep Knowledge Group study looked at hundreds of different sources and thousands of data points to rank countries by 4 different tiers. And they had Switzerland as the safest country in the world, followed by Germany, Israel, Singapore, Japan, Austria, China, Australia, New Zealand, and South Korea in 10th place. So I thought, I wonder how Switzerland's doing right now. And so I looked at the global ranking of COVID-19 cases, and I found that Switzerland is in the top about 50 or 60 countries when it comes to COVID-19 cases. So they're certainly not the worst in the world. They're kind of ranking in the top 3rd for the highest volume of cases, but it's certainly not the best, and it certainly can't be considered the safest if they have more than 37,000 reported cases and nearly 2,000 deaths. Switzerland is also listed as a level 3 out of 4 on the State Department's do not travel list. So that's not so good. So I decided to dig a little bit deeper and find out which countries are the safest right now. The next source I looked at was the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, because they rank countries by 3 different levels. Actually 4 if you include level 0, which are the lowest risk countries. So these are countries that don't have any sort of travel advisory against them at all right now, according to the CDC. And there are 13 countries on that list. So for very low risk countries, we have the British Virgin Islands, Brunei, Cayman Islands, Dominica, Falkland Islands, French Polynesia, Greenland, Laos, Macau, Mauritius, New Caledonia, New Zealand, Taiwan, and East Timor. Just for comparison's sake, I'm going to also tell you where those countries rank according to Johns Hopkins University when it comes to the number of COVID cases. But first, let's look at the level 1 countries from the CDC. So these are also low risk countries, but they're not zero risk countries. And there's a handful of countries on this list. We have Bonaire, Fiji, New Zealand, Saba, St. Barthélemy, St. Eustatius, and Thailand. So you can see that there's a pretty clear trend starting to appear between the very low and low risk countries. They're either very remote countries or islands like the Falkland Islands, for example, or they're islands in the Caribbean and also a few countries in Southeast Asia, like Laos, Macau, and Taiwan. So these are countries that have been very successful in suppressing their COVID outbreaks despite having a pretty significant population. Of course, it's going to be a little bit easier for islands like Saba and Fiji because they're very remote and they had time to close their borders and close their airports to incoming travelers. After that, the CDC has a level 2 list, which actually didn't have any countries on that list. So every other country on top of that is level 3 or a high risk country. Although the CDC is a US governmental organization, the US State Department has quite different countries on their do not travel list, which goes from a level 1 being the lowest or safest countries up to a level 4 being the highest risk do not travel countries. And there are only 2 countries on the State Department's low risk list, and those include Taiwan and Macau. The level 2 countries, according to the State Department, are Hong Kong, Antarctica, Brunei, Fiji, French Polynesia, Mauritius, New Caledonia, New Zealand, and Thailand. Another weird thing that I'm gonna cover in a minute is like, why are these low risk countries with low case numbers not on the European Union's approved countries list? So we're gonna get to that last. But first, let's go back to this Johns Hopkins list that's updated every day of COVID-19 cases around the world. And right now, the US is at the top of this list. And at the very, very bottom is Anguilla. I actually Googled how to pronounce that before this video and I already forgot, so hopefully that's right. Anguilla apparently only has 3 COVID-19 cases reported, followed by St. Pierre and the British Virgin Islands with only 9 cases. So this makes sense because the British Virgin Islands was a level 0 on that CDC list, but where was Anguilla? I don't think they were on either of the lists so far. A few of the other countries on this Johns Hopkins list that all have less than 100 reported COVID-19 cases include the Western Sahara, Vatican City, Bonaire, Saba, and St. Eustatius, which were on the other list, Montserrat, St. Barthélemy, Greenland, St. Kitts and Nevis, Dominica, Laos, New Caledonia, Grenada, East Timor, St. Lucia, Fiji, Curacao, Macau, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and St. Martin. Topping that list there with 89 and 92 cases are Liechtenstein and Antigua and Barbuda. And then from there, countries hovering with around 100 to 150 reported cases include French Polynesia, Bhutan, the Seychelles, Monaco, Brunei, Barbados, and Bermuda. But why aren't any of those countries on the European Union's approved countries list? That's what I want to know. And you guys know that we've done 3 or 4 different videos here on Europe's reopening plan and approved countries whose citizens can travel to Europe, and no new countries have been added to the original list. In fact, countries just keep getting kicked off. So as of August 8th, the only countries on the EU's approved travel list include Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, Canada, Georgia, Rwanda, Thailand, Tunisia, Uruguay, and still China, subject to reciprocity. So it's a little bit suspect. I wonder if it's more political than anything else, because if there are so many countries and Caribbean islands and different nations that have very few reported COVID-19 cases, why can't their citizens travel to countries with higher infection rates? It doesn't make that much sense to me. So if you're looking for a theme here, just to sum it up, if you're thinking of planning some travel in the next few months, the countries that are appearing most frequently as the lowest risk countries are primarily islands in the Caribbean and the South Pacific, as well as some countries in Southeast Asia. Although Switzerland and Germany were at the top of that Deep Knowledge Group safety assessment, they're not ranking on any of the other lists. So of course, European borders are open for travel right now within Europe, but those aren't necessarily the safest places in the world, because European countries still have really high COVID rates. And many European countries have a high number of deaths per 100,000 people. So if you're looking to plan travel, look at those remote islands. Look at places throughout the Caribbean and the South Pacific. So we're talking places like Antigua, Barbuda, Bermuda, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as those South Pacific nations like Fiji, for example, and remote places like Greenland and the Falkland Islands. Also, don't forget about Thailand, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau, which seem to have things very well under control. Are you surprised by these rankings? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below, and also which country you're most looking forward to traveling to when the pandemic is over. And make sure to subscribe, because we have a lot more videos coming in the next few weeks on the safest countries in the world in general. We've got cost of living videos for Bali, Norway, Costa Rica, and more, as well as plenty of COVID-19 travel updates and top countries lists for cost of living and quality of life. I'm Kristin, you're watching Traveling with Kristin, and subscribe for more COVID travel updates.